may be the greatest catch I've ever seen in my life.
Okay, I hope everyone had a great Halloween, and I'm not going to lie, this was a crazy week of football where usually on these recap shows, we can come out here and we can go, hell yes, we crushed it, chalk one up to the flock. This week, I feel like we maybe got rolled in a few spots. Some players that I wanted to go in on. I mean, if you were out in the Sunday morning, a player like Russell Gage that we'll get to later on in the video, once Ridley's ruled out, hell yeah, sign me up for some Russell Gage. I mean, clearly that not working out. We're going to go through, recap everything. But of course, before we get into it, make sure you go down there, drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel. I mean, we live stream every single night. So for whatever reason, you have not hit the bell next to the subscribe button, make sure you do that. That way you can come out to our live streams. That way you can get your questions answered. We live stream every night. We've live streamed every night, over 100 nights in a row at this point. Videos every single day. Y'all know the drill. And you know what we also have to do? We have to give away some Fantasy Flock Network hats here. Let me go pick up some random comments. Our first one coming out from Michael. I'm sorry, my friend. I am just now seeing this question. Hope you made the right decision in going with Elijah Mitchell. We would have told you T. Higgins, so you're lucky I didn't answer this question. But anyway, you're winning that Fantasy Flock Network hat. Ethan coming out with our next question. And yeah, that's just obviously way out of here by now. But anyway, just make sure if y'all win one of those Fantasy Flock Network hats, I go through and I give away free hats every single video for the people that drop those likes, leave those comments. All you have to do is send me that email ASAP with your physical address so I can get that out to you. And also, if you want your Fantasy Flock Network hat and you haven't been able to win one so far, you can always get one by deciding to join the flock on Patreon. Over there, when you decide to join the flock on Patreon, I personally make an in-depth podcast breaking down your fantasy football team. You get our rest of season rankings updated every single week. You get our dynasty rankings. You get to be in a dynasty league with us, or a couple dynasty leagues with us. You get in our group chat. There's just so much going on there. But that's it. Let's dive into it. Let's start it off with Joe Mixon. Now, Joe Mixon, I know, is a running back that's not going to headline a lot of just fantasy football articles in week 9. But honestly, I'm looking at Mixon. I'm saying this, in my opinion, is the biggest news of the week, because with Joe Mixon, y'all know this was a running back that we loved coming into the season based on the idea that with no Giovanni Bernard, he was going to get an uptick in his receiving down usage. To go along with that, with Joe Mixon, we were expecting that this Cincinnati Bengals offense would be drastically improved with the addition of Jamar Chase, adding the vertical element that was going to allow Joe Mixon to not have to go up against those stacked boxes. And yeah, that's exactly what we got here. I mean, Joe Mixon coming out, he gets that additional usage in the receiving game. He had 5 targets out of the backfield. And why it's so important and why it's so weird to say that with Joe Mixon, we're finally learning the lesson that he is the bell cow running back once we're in week 8, is if we're going through and looking at this season so far with Joe Mixon. I mean, if we go through, look at the past month, let's go back to week 4, where Joe Mixon at the end of that game, I mean, he actually tweaks his ankle, so we don't really get to see exactly what the snap rates would have looked like, because he is sitting out the final few drives against the Jacksonville Jaguars that Thursday night, where Samaje Perine is in there getting the workload. And then in week 5 with Joe Mixon, you had him clearly not healthy, where Samaje Perine did split this backfield 50-50. And then in week 6, Samaje Perine was not playing at all. Samaje Perine was on the COVID list. Week 7, they blow out the Baltimore Ravens by like 35 points. So Joe Mixon was a running back that we loved coming into the season. But by the time we get to week 8, I really don't know what we have, because every week that you're looking at, there's just one variable here, one variable there, that's making the entire week a little skewed in one single direction, which isn't giving us clarity on the situation. Well, we get that clarity now. Mixon coming out 14 carries, 5 targets out of the backfield. I mean, if you're looking at this and comparing it to what we actually had with Samaje Perine, Perine only had 14 snaps compared to Joe Mixon's 42 snaps. He also only had 2 targets out of the backfield and a total of 0 carries in a close contest against the New York Jets here. I mean, with Joe Mixon, so far the running back 2 this week, you love to see what we had. And now our next lesson learned is, I guess, I mean, as long as you get Zach Wilson out of New York, Michael Carter is going to be a league-winning running back here. My God, Michael Carter coming out, and this is one of the calls that I'm just sitting here going, Oh my gosh, we messed this up horribly because I was telling everybody, yeah, we love the long-term upside with Michael Carter based on the fact that this running back does profile to be the 3-down option in New York. We know that he is a great receiving running back out of the backfield. We know that he also does have an adequate BMI, as we've discussed in our Dynasty Rookie Draft Guide, with Michael Carter coming into the NFL to handle usage on all 3 downs. He was trending in the right direction where he was moving up our rest of season rankings. But in this week in particular, against the Bengals, where the Bengals were 10.5-point team favorites, with the New York Jets with Mike White at quarterback were at the very bottom of implied team totals according to Las Vegas, I was coming out in the streams and I told way too many people to bench Michael Carter. I mean, I was getting questions, Michael Carter or Zach Moss, and I was going, you know what? We're going to go Zach Moss. His offense will be putting up drastically more points. He'll have more opportunities in the red zone, and Zach Moss does have some sneaky receiving appeal. It doesn't matter. I mean, Michael Carter coming out and the perfect workload, 14 targets out of the backfield. I mean, that's Najee Harris level numbers. 15 rushing attempts as well. You get 95 receiving yards. You get 77 rushing yards, a rushing touchdown to go along with it. It doesn't matter how you cut this. Michael Carter is here to stay. I mean, obviously, you're not going to be seeing this many points for the New York Jets very often. But with Michael Carter here, I mean, he's the running back 1 in fantasy this week. Now, the question is, how high are we going to move him in our rest of season rankings over there on Patreon? Of course, I'm not going to be updating those rest of season rankings on Patreon tonight. It's going to take me a lot of work to do that. We're probably going to get them updated over there on Tuesday. That way we get the Monday night game as well. But I mean, we're probably going to be jumping Michael Carter up to a range where he has to be, I mean, at least ahead of Javonte Williams. No, and I was saying that we definitely prefer Javonte Williams coming into the week. We're moving him ahead of Antonio Gibson. He's probably going to be running back 16, 17 in our rest of season rankings. I think Carter truly does look like that league winning player. Now, our next lesson learned, this is something that we crushed. We crushed this so damn hard. What would you have said if I would have came out and I would have gone, you know what? In Philadelphia, you are going to have them crushing the Detroit Lions to the point where it's not even close. You are going to have this game being 44-6. And if you're going to be looking at the passing attempts versus rushing yards for this offense, I mean, you have 14 passing attempts for Jalen Hurts here. And if we're going to be counting up the amount of rushing attempts we had for this offense, I mean, just among these 4 players, you essentially almost had 50 carries in this offense, almost 50 carries for the Philadelphia Eagles. Yet despite all of that, Kenneth Gainwell doesn't really come through with the production. And remember what we were saying in those live streams, that with Kenneth Gainwell, he was our number 1 waiver wire pickup, but you could not be playing him right away because we didn't know the usage. We didn't know the role of Boston Scott and Jordan Howard in this offense. Well, you actually get pretty much Scott, Howard, and Gainwell all equal in carries. Now, keep in mind, I mean, this is going to be very hard to take anything away from because this game was never close, but he had 13 carries for Gainwell, 12 for Jordan Howard, 12 for Boston Scott. Boston Scott, Jordan Howard both come away with 2 rushing touchdowns. Gainwell, I mean, if they're going to be splitting this backfield into thirds, you're clearly not going to be able to start anybody from Philadelphia here. Now, I don't necessarily want to say that Jordan Howard is always going to get this usage, but still it is impactful. I know it's not everything given the game flow of this overall game, but you cannot start Kenneth Gainwell. That's one thing that I'm very happy about this week, is that we told a ton of people to bench Gainwell. And our next running back, we did not tell enough people to go out there and play with Elijah Mitchell. Now, Elijah Mitchell, I mean, this was a running back that we were coming out and saying, you know what? He is literally Damian Harris in San Francisco. This is someone that if he gets the rushing touchdown and he gets the 100 rushing yards, you're extremely happy, but he does not have a role in his receiving game. And yeah, that's pretty much exactly what you get from Elijah Mitchell. But I mean, the thing is, the 49ers have a monstrous day. So he comes out, and while he doesn't get a single target out of the backfield, so don't be surprised when I come and say to sell high Elijah Mitchell this week. He does have 18 carries, which is just like he had a week ago against the Colts. He has 137 rushing yards and the rushing touchdown. I'm not going to be taking too much away from Elijah Mitchell here. I know if we don't bring his name up, people are going to get very upset. Still, I mean, given the fact that he is not really running any routes out of the backfield, that's all going to JaMychal Hasty. I want to be a little bit hesitant all of a sudden calling him a league-winning running back because the role's not as good as what you have with Michael Carter. Like Michael Carter, Elijah Mitchell, give me Michael Carter every single time. But Mitchell definitely does look like he is at least going to be the starting running back for a very long time in San Francisco. Now, something that we got horribly wrong this week, and it's embarrassing how wrong we got. The Seattle Seahawks coming out, and with Geno Smith, y'all know we said we want to be avoiding every running back we can in Seattle. We want to be avoiding every wide receiver not named DK Metcalf. We've been benching Tyler Lockett over the past month since Russell Wilson got injured. I mean, it definitely worked out 2 weeks in particular where Tyler Lockett didn't even crack 6 fantasy points. But my God, you have Geno Smith not even with 200 passing yards this week. Geno Smith did not get to 200 passing yards, but it did not matter because talk about a concentrated offense in Seattle. You get a total of 4 players getting a target in Seattle. If we're just going to be looking at receptions here, Gerald Everett, Travis Homer, they each log 1 reception. So you get 2 receptions to players not named Tyler Lockett or DK Metcalf. Lockett and Metcalf account for literally 90% of the receptions in Seattle. A much higher percentage if you were just going to be looking at the receiving yardage. Like if you had a pie drawn for the Seattle Seahawks offense, the overall pie, it's not that big. I mean, it's a pretty small offensive pie just knowing that Geno Smith did limit this offense, but it didn't matter because Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf, they ate it all. With Lockett here, he gets 12 receptions, 142 receiving yards. DK Metcalf, 6 receptions, 43 receiving yards, 2 receiving touchdowns. So all I have to say is I'm sorry. I thought that Geno Smith was going to be handicapping this offense to a point where we didn't want these options. We didn't want them in our starting lineup. I was going to be trying to even pivot off of them in trades previously. But at this point, I think that now you're just looking at pretty much the fact that they're not going to anybody else in Seattle. And you have to say, it doesn't matter how bad the offense is. You essentially have 2 Brandon Cooks level players with their market share numbers in Seattle. Just they're significantly better. Now, our next lesson learned is you should have listened to me when we said to go out there and trade for A.J. Brown. I mean, y'all know our top buy low candidates for a very long time, pretty much for a month. I mean, the names that we brought up over and over and over again, A.J. Brown, Keenan Allen, and Calvin Ridley. Calvin Ridley, I'm not going to be able to say anything in this video. No idea what's going on. If anybody comes out, tries to tell you they know what's going on, they are lying to you. We'll get to the Atlanta Falcons situation with no Calvin Ridley later on. But regardless, obviously, Calvin, I'm not chalking that up to us making a mistake. I think that's just complete random chance. Regardless, A.J. Brown, the wide receiver 1 this week. Let's dive into him. Obviously, no Julio Jones in this offense. But he comes out 11 targets, leads the Tennessee Titans in targets like he's done every single week that he has been healthy so far this year. 10 receptions, 155 receiving yards, and the receiving touchdown to go along with it. So you are getting A.J. Brown finally out here as a very efficient wide receiver, as we have discussed him being back in 2019, back in 2020, like we knew he would in 2021, as long as the volume remained. So I really hope that everybody here went through and bought low on A.J. Brown because he's another player that's going to be drastically rising in our rest of season rankings. I'm not going to be surprised if A.J. Brown's hovering around like wide receiver 6, wide receiver 7 in those rankings when it's all said and done. Now let's go over to the tight end position where at tight end, we are going to have someone else that was on our buy low list. And he looks like he is a bona fide stud, 100% healthy. TJ Hockenson, y'all know this was someone we were been talking about buying low earlier this season. After he came out, he had 2 targets in a week. He had 3 targets in a week, but a lot of people are just panicking on TJ Hockenson, not really looking into the context of the situation and that this was a tight end dealing with a multitude of injuries. And in a couple of those disappointing weeks, we didn't even know if he was going to be playing. I mean, he was a game time decision, and he was a true game time decision because he wasn't really at practice. He would log like a limited practice on Friday, and then all of a sudden we go, oh, is Hockenson playing or not? He would roll out there. I would say to start him. Yeah, we made the wrong call, but now it doesn't really matter. Hockenson right back to that player he was before. The Detroit Lions don't score at all here. It doesn't really matter for Hockenson, however, just given the fact that this is a tight end that he has the talent, he has the volume in the offense. I mean, 11 targets this past week, 10 receptions, 89 receiving yards. You're looking at the past 3 weeks, and TJ Hockenson has had more than 10 targets a game. I mean, Hockenson, he hasn't scored a touchdown since week 2, But I think you have to be, I don't know how high is too high on Hockenson because the volume's there. And if he continues to see this many targets, he's had 64 targets so far this season with only 2 touchdowns. Now you're going to be expecting pretty much everybody has a lower touchdown rate than league average in Detroit, knowing the red zone opportunities aren't going to be through the roof. But with Hockenson and the talent that he also is in the red zone, I'd imagine that's going to be going up sometime soon. Now let's go over to Atlanta because this is a situation that I didn't tell anybody to really start Russell Gage. Just say Monday through Saturday on any of those live streams. I really only told a handful of people Sunday morning to play Russell Gage. So obviously I feel very bad for it, but thank God I didn't make a massive mistake and say to start him during the week. But you're looking at Russell Gage, and this was a wide receiver that was the wide receiver 15 just 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago when Calvin Ridley was playing in that game against the Miami Dolphins, and Calvin Ridley had double-digit targets. And Kyle Pitts dropped like 160 receiving yards. In that contest, Russell Gage had 6 targets, 4 receptions, 64 receiving yards, and a receiving touchdown, dropping 16.5 fantasy points. So once we had Calvin Ridley ruled out against the Carolina Panthers, I was expecting that Russell Gage, who had 6 targets with no Calvin Ridley, that demonstrated back in 2020 that he had the upside when you had no Julio Jones or Calvin Ridley in this offense. Going back to what we had in 2020, you're looking at Russell Gage, week 1, 12 targets, 9 receptions, 114 receiving yards. Week 2, 9 targets, 6 receptions, 46 receiving yards, a receiving touchdown. Back in week 11, 12 targets, and then also 10 targets week 15. You had those spike weeks when Calvin Ridley was not in this offense. Well, I guess at this point, just Russell Gage is not a player we can trust. I think the only players that you can currently trust in Atlanta are going to be Kyle Pitts, who had a disappointing game in his own right, Cordell Patterson, who we talked about being very high on, and Calvin Ridley himself when Ridley does play, but we just simply don't know when that's going to be. Of course, we'll get to that later on in the week in some of those live streams. Make sure you are subscribed. Now, our next lesson learned, let's go over to Chicago, and let's just pencil this in. Now, I need to give a shout out. I believe it was Slim74 in one of the live streams. I believe maybe it was the Friday night live stream asking me, Mason, what's the chance that Allen Robinson comes out and without Matt Nagy in the Chicago Bears offense, Allen Robinson balls out? And I'm like, oh no, that's not going to happen. A projected wide receiver like that getting significantly better just with the loss of his head coach. There's no way that's going to happen. Well, apparently it can happen with Justin Fields. I guess you could say at this point, Matt Nagy, he is guaranteed to not be the starting head coach, not starting quarterback, the head coach for the Chicago Bears in 2022. You get Justin Fields coming out, and so far, he's a top 5 quarterback this week. He went for over 100 rushing yards. So they unleash him as a rusher as soon as Matt Nagy is not in Chicago. He has not that great a passing volume. He doesn't really support Darnell Mooney, Allen Robinson. Darnell Mooney is the better wide receiver in this situation at this point, but the passing volume still isn't there. But why you like Justin Fields in fantasy drafts isn't because you expected him to be some great passer. We kind of knew he wasn't going to be a great passer, but we thought that he did have that rushing upside coming into the NFL. Clearly he does, as long as Nagy's not just tying him to a chair and telling me he has to sit in that pocket as if he's Andy Dalton. So yeah, hopefully we kind of get this offense just changing and giving some more mobility to Justin Fields going forward. Because if he can go through an average 60, 70 rushing yards a week, of course this is going to be an option that you have to get excited about. Now let's go over to our next lesson learned. Let's go over to Nick Chubb in Cleveland. And with Nick Chubb, this was a running back. I thought he was going to come out and be a top 3 running back behind an elite offensive line. And our thought process for this is we were saying, okay, we didn't like Nick Chubb in fantasy drafts, but with no Kareem Hunt in this offense, I promise you, Dearness Johnson, Demetric Felton, these are not running backs that are anything close to the same level of talent that you have with a Kareem Hunt. So they are not going to be getting usage in the receiving game. That's going to be going in the direction of Nick Chubb. Well, we are kind of right about that. Where if you're looking at Dearness Johnson, yeah, he only gets 1 reception. But I think the mistake that we made in regards of Nick Chubb, who also only logged 1 reception on his own right, is that just because Kareem Hunt isn't in that offense and Dearness Johnson is not the talent of Kareem Hunt, we naturally assumed that meant the 4 or 5 receptions a week that you got from Kareem Hunt in this backfield were just naturally going to flow in the direction of Nick Chubb. I guess what probably is actually going to be the case when you do not have Kareem Hunt here is that they just don't use the running backs in the receiving game as much. Now, that is a true lesson learned. I mean, now we kind of have a better idea of what this offense will look like with no Hunt here. So it does suck to say that, but I thought that, I mean, trust me, I'm kind of happy to see this because, of course, we didn't draft Nick Chubb everywhere. We talked about that at length pretty much every single video this offseason, but I still thought that anybody who drafted Nick Chubb was actually going to be in a pretty good spot with no Kareem Hunt. Now, our next lesson learned is Antonio Gibson is just straight up dead. Y'all know we called Antonio Gibson a sell-high running back about a month ago after he was coming off those massive performances with the long receiving touchdown. I mean, he had like 4 touchdowns through 3 weeks. We viewed it as an unsustainable mark given the usage that he had in Washington. However, I actually kind of fell into Antonio Gibson this Sunday morning, this Saturday night, where whenever he was fully taken off the injury report, I mean, I was all of a sudden looking at him going, okay, well, we know this game's going to be closer for the Washington football team and the Denver Broncos. Maybe if this is going to be a closer contest, you're actually going to be getting less J.D. McKissic, more Antonio Gibson. If Gibson's fully off the injury report, maybe this is an Antonio Gibson game. Well, not only is it not an Antonio Gibson game, not only does J.D. McKissic come out and see 32 snaps compared to Antonio Gibson's 23, but at the same time, my God, Antonio Gibson has a total of 8 carries compared to Jarrett Patterson's 11. Antonio Gibson, you can't drop him, but if I ever tell you to start Antonio Gibson again in fantasy, what you need to do for me is unsubscribe to the channel. I fell into him Sunday morning, fell into him Saturday night based on him being taken off the injury report, based on the fact that we thought we were going to get less J.D. McKissic. Well, Jarrett Patterson coming out here telling us, I mean, that Gibson doesn't really mean anything. Now, thank you, of course, for supporting the channel. Thank you again for being a part of the flock. Really hope that you enjoyed this video. Really hope that you had a great Halloween. And we are going to see you out in the live stream tomorrow night, the night after that, the night after that, the night after that, the night after that. Whenever it may be, you know we'll be live streaming. I'll be happy to answer any questions we have then. Be happy to get you a in-depth podcast breaking down your fantasy team and moves to make from there. Just make sure you go support the channel on Patreon. You can find our Fantasy Flock Network hats over there on Patreon. You can get a podcast breaking down your dynasty team, a podcast breaking down your regular 2021 roster. You can get pretty much anything you want. Our rest of season rankings, our dynasty rankings, get in a dynasty league with us, get in our group chat. There's so much stuff going on over there. Check the link in the description of the video. That's all I got for you. Thank you so much and have a great day.